Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody. Welcome to the Navigating NASA's Land Processes Distributed Active Archive Center, or LP DAAC, to find answers to your deepest land data questions webinar. This is your host, Jennifer Brennan. It's 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. What I'd like to do first is go over a few logistics. To ensure the best audio experience, participants have been placed in silent mode. But if you have any issues or questions, what I'd like for you to do is enter those into the Q&A pod, and you'll find that located on the right-hand side of your screen. This works like a chat. Today's webinar is being recorded. The recording will be posted to our online Adobe Connect webinar catalog, as well as to our NASA Earth Data YouTube channel within a few days of completion. Once completed, I will send an email to all registrants with a direct link as well as a YouTube link to today's webinar. As far as timing is concerned, today's webinar will be 1 hour long and with 45 minutes allocated to the presentation and live demonstrations, and an additional 15 minutes for the question and answer period. Once our speaker for today has finished with their presentation, we will transition to a final optional set of polling questions. And then we'll give these questions about 3 to 5 minutes or so, and then from there we'll move directly into the Q&A period. Depending upon the volume of questions that are received, we will extend the Q&A period an additional 15 minutes from end time for those of you who may wish to stay on the line, but we will end with a hard cutoff at 3:15 p.m. Our speaker for today's webinar is Danielle Golan. She is the Science Communication Specialist at NASA's LP DAAC. She will kick off today's presentation with an overview of the LP DAAC participation in the annual Earth Observing System Data and Information System, or EOSDIS, American Customer Satisfaction Index, or ACSI, annual survey. And then from there, she'll spend about the first half of today's webinar providing an introduction to LP DAAC data, services, and tools, and will include a short demo with the Appears tool as part of this segment. From there, she will wrap up the webinar with a description of LP DAAC resources and a website walkthrough. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Danielle Golan. Danielle?
Hello. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so you should be seeing my presentation, correct?
I do see your presentation. Thank you, Danielle.
All right, perfect. Okay, so hello. As Jennifer mentioned, my name is Danielle Golan, and I'm the Science Communication Specialist for NASA's Land Processes Distributed Active Archive Center, or LP DAAC. So let's go ahead and get started. So some background on why we're giving this presentation. The LP DAAC is part of NASA's EOSDIS, or Earth Observing System Data and Information System, which is managed by the Earth Science Data and Information System, or ESDIS project. So for the past 15 years, ESDIS has asked users to take an annual survey to measure user satisfaction of ESDIS and the DAAC using the American Customer Satisfaction Index, or ACSI, as Jennifer mentioned. So at the LP DAAC, the responses to this survey frame a lot of what we do in the future in terms of our tools and resources for the data, and even when thinking about updates to the data. But we realized, at least for the LP DAAC, our users spend a lot of time taking the survey, but we don't necessarily share how the results of the survey are impacting the daily work we're doing at the LP DAAC. And while we provide resources to answer some of the questions that were asked on the survey, those answers might not be getting back to the users that asked them. So we wanted to hold this webinar to both share how the results of the survey impact what we are doing at the DAAC, and to provide answers to common questions that we were asked on the survey and that our user services team receives throughout the year. So today I'm going to provide a brief background of the LP DAAC, information about the land data we distribute, the tools you can use to access and customize the data, and resources to better understand working with the data that are offered by the LP DAAC. And then I'll also talk about how we've improved these items based on feedback from the survey and answer common questions we've received. And finally, I'll conclude the presentation with information about the upcoming survey and answer any remaining questions users may have. So let's jump right in. So what is NASA's LP DAAC? Well, as I mentioned, we are the Land Processes Distributed Active Archive Center. We're located at the USGS Earth Resources Observation and Science, or AERO Center in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The LP DAAC was established in 1990, whereas AERO itself was established in the 1970s. And as I mentioned, we're one of the NASA EOSDIS DAACs around the country. Some of the other DAACs cover topics like snow and ice, ocean biology, socioeconomic data, but we specifically work with land data. So on screen are some of the common data questions we received on the survey and throughout the year. So what is the temporal extent of the data? What is the cost of the data? Where can I find documentation about the data? Is there any information on citing the data? The website search is logically organized, but it's a little confusing. I kind of just want a list of useful data, or where can I get X data, or where can I learn about data updates? When are the servers down, so I know to maybe not try and download data or access the website at that time, or even just simply, I really want LiDAR data. So let's dive in to answer some of the questions. Just a quick background on our data archive. The archive provides access to 3.5 petabytes of data and extends from 1981 to present, with many temporal ranges in between, including daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and more. And this data ranges from 1 millimeter to 5,600 meters. Now, full disclosure, it's a little unfair to say 1 millimeter, as our millimeter level data is over a specific area in the U.S. state of Minnesota. A larger portion of our archive currently starts at 15-meter resolution. The image on the left shows one of the largest solar energy parks in India at a 15-meter resolution from the Aster Sensor. The image on the right shows the entire Earth at one day from the VIIR satellite sensor at 5,600 meters. So we can see down to solar panels and as large as the entire Earth in one day. And most importantly, everything I'm going to talk about today is available to you at no cost. So what types of data are available? Well, on screen are the currently available types of data from the LP DAAC. They cover a wide variety of topics, including surface reflectance, vegetation, elevation, and more. Now, if you're interested in a type of data that you don't see on the screen, let me know after the presentation, and I can try to connect you to a DAAC that might meet your data needs. We're also actively adding new data products to the archive. We've recently just added, I think, 15 products in the past month. So as we're adding new data, we also will be expanding the types of data that are available, and this can sometimes be based on user feedback. So we have all these types of data available, but where do they come from? Well, our newest sensor is EcoStress, or the Ecosystem Spaceborne Thermal Radiometer Experiment on Space Station. And we've just started releasing these data over the past couple of months, and they're really unlike anything we've distributed before. This is the LP DAAC's first sensor on the International Space Station, or the ISS. And essentially, EcoStress measures the temperature of plants, providing answers to questions about vegetation and water availability and water stress, agricultural vulnerability, and more. And one of the really cool products out of EcoStress is the Evaporative Stress Index, or the ESI, which is a drought indicator that can indicate when plants are stressed and a drought is likely to occur. Next, we have VIIRS, the Visible Infrared Imaging Radiometer Suite. VIIRS is aboard Suwami and is a continuation of MODIS, which is a continuation of AZHRR. VIIRS is a joint mission between NASA and NOAA, but the VIIRS data we distribute are NASA-produced data. VIIRS is continuously capturing data, so with VIIRS, we're seeing larger pictures of an area, but with less detail. Then we have MODIS, the Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectroradiometer Sensor, which is aboard Terra and Aqua. It's similar to VIIRS, so again, providing information about the bigger picture of the Earth, but with less details. And if you are currently using MODIS data, one thing to note is we will be reprocessing the data to a version 6.1 over the next couple of months, and this will include improvements to the input data. So if you are using MODIS version 5 or version 6, definitely make sure to stay up to date with the DAAC to see when version 6.1 is ready. We also have the Aster Sensor, the Advanced Spaceborne Thermal Emission and Reflection Radiometer. This is aboard Terra, like MODIS. Aster is a little different. It is taskable, meaning it needs to be told to turn on. Aster provides higher detailed data than MODIS or VIIRS, but over a smaller area. Then we have our NASA Measures products. So these projects expand our understanding of the Earth through already existing satellite measurements. I think it's kind of cool that we're reusing these data in unique ways that differ from their original purpose. And finally, we have our community products. So these are either derived from one or more NASA Earth Observing System or EOS missions, or they're submitted by users like that very fine detailed data over Minnesota that I mentioned earlier. Now, I'm more of a visual learner, so here's a visual representation of our 4 backbone sensors at the LP DAAC to provide a better understanding both spatially and temporally. So the data range from 15 meter all the way to 5,600 meters. And again, we have that 70 meter resolution with eco stress. And the data are also available daily and all the way up to annual composites. But this is a very exciting time at the LP DAAC because we have even more brand new, very unique data products on the horizon. So I wanted to take a second to talk about those. So we have GWELD, the Global Web-Enabled Landsat data. These are data products that are global composited mosaic Landsat imagery at a 30-meter resolution. And we currently offer WELD data, which is specifically over CONUS and Alaska, but these data will expand our global scale and provide monthly and annual data for any terrestrial non-Antarctic location for 6 3-year epochs that occur every 5 years from 1985 to 2010. GWELD is scheduled to be available to users next month. We also have JEDI, the Global Ecosystem Dynamics Investigation. JEDI is located on the ISS. It was launched on December 5th, 2018, and started collecting data on March 25th, 2019. It's a full waveform LiDAR instrument that will produce detailed observations of the 3D structure of the Earth's surface and precisely measure forest canopy vertical structure, and surface elevation. And this image on the left is an example of some of the initial JEDI data that we have received, and this data is scheduled to be available this October. Next, we have G-LIGHT, or Goddard's LiDAR Hyperspectral and Thermal Imager. GI is a portable airborne imaging system that simultaneously maps the composition, structure, and function of terrestrial ecosystems using LiDAR, imaging spectroscopy, and thermal measurements. It enables data fusion studies by providing parallel data in both time and space and provides fine-scale or less than a meter observations over larger areas. So here we have an example of some G-LIGHT data on the right. So we can see the canopy of the trees, we can see some houses in a neighborhood, some of the roads, and even individual cars with G-LIGHT. And G-LIGHT is scheduled to be available to users this winter. And last but not least, we have EMIT, the Earth Surface Mineral Dust Source Investigation. EMIT will also be located on the ISS and is scheduled to launch June of 2021. It will constrain the sign and magnitude of dust-related radiant forcing at regional and global scales and predict the increase or decrease of available dust sources under future climate scenarios. So now that I've covered the data, I wanted to show you where to find the data on the brand new LP DAAC website. We recently did a significant reorganization of our data directly from user feedback, both from the survey and from our users in general, to make the website a little easier to use. So on screen, you can see a link for our website, and I'm going to show the website now. Now, full disclosure, we had some issues earlier today, so the link might not be working. So I'm going to use an internal link, but it will show exactly what the website looks like. So here we have our website. And this is what our homepage looks like. So we have a brand new, recently designed top hat. Based on user feedback, we updated the top hat to be a little more clear and succinct about what information is going to be located where. If there's ever any alerts from the LP DAAC, you'll find these just below the top hat on the homepage of the website. These alerts will include mentioning things like, we're normally down on Wednesdays from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time for routine maintenance, and any important data updates or any warnings about changes that might impact your workflows in the future. Below that, we have a rolling set of images that show some of the new data and action stories that we've recently released. And below that, we have our news and events section. So the news and events section is where you're going to find all the latest news from the LP DAAC, like if a tool has been retired, or if we've released some new data, or if we have any updates to the data that are currently available. You can also always subscribe to an RSS feed using the subscribe button as well. Below that, we have our new Collaborate with Us section. This section is how we focus on providing access to various channels that we use to communicate with the user community. This includes our listserv. We send out about 1 to 2 listserv messages a month that provides updates on data, tools, and resources from the LP DAAC. You can also follow the NASA Earth Data Twitter and NASA Earth Data Facebook pages where social media content from the LP DAAC is posted. Now, the number one question we receive from new users is, how do I just get started? So we actually devised and created a plan to teach users how to just get started with data. So we have under data, we have our get started section. And on this section, we have our collection overview. So our collection overview is where you can find out more information about the different collections from the DAAC. So the MODIS data, Aster data, VIIRS, measures, communities, the data product I was mentioning earlier. So we have from this page, you can kind of get an overview about the sensor, and also you can see all of the products from that specific sensor. From the data section, we also have the instrument specifications page. And this is where it provides technical information about the data sensors or instruments themselves. And you can easily compare and contrast the different sensors. So for example, if you're using MODIS data and you want to see which sensors have a similar band wavelength, you can use this page to do so. Then we also have our workflow example section. So the workflow example section provides overviews about different science themes and walkthroughs on how to use different resources from the LP DAAC to support your research. So we currently have the vegetation workflow example, but we're working on creating more workflow examples for other science themes in the future as well. These workflow examples will kind of show an overview. So how does vegetation data from the LP DAAC work? What's the vegetation index? You can also see from the example, we have an example science question, and then we walk you through how you can answer that question using data and resources from the LP DAAC. So next under the website, we have the search data catalog. So this section has been completely revamped based on user feedback. Most importantly, we've updated our search parameters. So we moved them to the top of the page and we renamed them to be a little bit easier for users to understand what we mean by these search parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and search for global vegetation data. So I'll type in vegetation and I'll hit enter. And now I can see all of the vegetation products that are available from the LP DAAC that have been tagged as providing vegetation information in one of their layers. Now I can kind of see a preview image of what these data might look like. I can see what the short name of the data is as well as the long name. And I can see some keywords that are tagged with them as well as the tools that are associated with that data product. If I want, I can also look at the list view so I can easily compare between these different data products. So now I can examine and see what these spatial resolutions are for these products, what the collections are, the keywords to make sure it's right for me. And as I mentioned, I want to look at global vegetation data. So I'm going to go ahead and click on spatial resolution and change this to 5,600 meters, and then I'll click apply. So now I'm just seeing the global vegetation data products from the LP DAAC. And I could further filter this down, so I could say if I just want data during a specific time period, I can make sure these data cover my time period. I can choose collection, so if I'm comfortable working with MODIS data, I can choose MODIS data. I can also filter down to my keywords, so if I just want vegetation indices focused data, I can filter down even further, and so on and so forth with some of the other parameters that we offer. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this Mod 13 C2 page. So I'll just click on it, and that will bring up the DOI landing page. So we've definitely revented this DOI landing page to make it a little easier for users to follow. One of the most frequent things we hear from users is, I want quick access to documents about the data, or I want to know where I can find the data, how are the data being used, and how can I cite the data. So we brought up all of this information to the top of the page in this little bubble system to make it a little easier to find. So if you click on documentation, that's going to pull up the user guides, the ATBDs, and the file specifications, essentially documentation we've received from the PIs that have created these products. We also have the using the data bubble. This provides examples of how the data have been used and any e-learning items that can help you with using this data. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about these resources later on in the presentation. We also have our tools page. So this brings up all the tools that work with this specific data product. So either downloading this product or customizing this product or decoding quality information for this product. And finally, we have the citation bubble. So we have implemented a handy citation generator through either APA or Chicago styles. So you can click on the citation, and it would normally bring up a citation. You could copy and paste it, and then just put that right into your research paper. With our website having a little issues today, we unfortunately couldn't see that. But here's also the DOI for the product. So anytime you want to get back to this product page, you can just search for this DOI, and it'll bring you to the product page. Okay, so below that, we have the description of the data product. And then we have our characteristics. So if there's any improvements or changes about previous versions from the product, you'll find those here. If you're interested in something like the scale factor for one of the layers, you'll find that information here as well. Essentially, this lower part is more of the nitty-gritty details of the data. Okay, so speaking of data citation, let's jump back up and look at the data citations and policy page. So based on user feedback, we've completely changed this page as well. We've kind of redefined it and condensed it so it's a little bit easier to read and understand. So all of our data access is available at no charge. And our data redistribution, all current data products are available and have no restrictions on reuse, sale, or redistribution. Now, if you are previously using Aster GDEM version 2 data, that did have some restrictions. And so we've included that information below to make sure that you still know what you need to cite and what kinds of redistribution requirements there were for Aster GDEM version 2. But last month, we released Aster GDEM version 3, which has no restrictions. So if you are working with Aster GDEM version 2 and are at a point where you could download GDEM version 3, we highly recommend it. Okay, so now that I've kind of talked about the data, let's jump back into the presentation to cover how to access and customize the data. So these are some of the common questions we've received about tools to work with the data. So for example, what tool is right for me? How do I process data? How do I bulk download data? Do you offer an API? Are there any tutorials for these data? These types of questions. And the answer is, to a lot of them, yes. So the first off, we offer a wide variety of methods to access and customize the data. On screen are some of our more popular tools. So if you're an experienced user and you just want to get your hands on the original HDF files of the data so you can just get straight to work, then I recommend using the data pool. If you're an R or Python user, then I recommend using the DAAC to DIS utility. And if you prefer a preview of what some of the individual data scenes look like, maybe you want to make sure everything you're downloading in your study area, and maybe you want to look to see what other data possibilities are in your area, then I recommend NASA's Earth Data Search or the USGS Earth Explorer. If you want a tool that allows you to dive in and does the customization for you and lets you explore your data values before you download anything, I definitely recommend checking out Appears, which I will show you in a few minutes. And finally, if you just need a pretty picture or a base map, we offer the Web Map services. These do not provide actual data values, but they do provide a rolling data view of the Earth for several MODIS products. Now, as I mentioned, we also have other tools, so let's hop back over to the website to learn more. So from the top hat, I'm going to hover over Tools and click on View All Tools. So we frequently have heard from users, they just want to know what tool they should be using for whatever stage they're at in their research. So we ended up bringing all of our tools into one place, and we've made it filterable based on what you want to use the tool for. So for example, if I just want to subset data, I can click on Subset, and now it's going to highlight the tools that we offer that allow you to subset data. I'm going to go ahead and click on this Appears tool so I can kind of learn a little bit more about it. This will pull up the Appears landing page. The very first thing to know about the landing page is that you can click on this Launch Appears button. If you've used Appears before, if you're comfortable with the tool, or if you just want to dive right in, this Launch button will take you directly to the tool. If you want a little more help understanding the tool or learning about different things using the tool, then we also have our bubble system here as well. So this provides documentation. These are documents strictly from the people who created the tool that can kind of help you with starting using the tool. We have our available products. So these are the LP DAAC products that are available within that tool. So for Appears, we have 79 available products. And then we have our Using the Tool section. This pulls up e-learning and data and action stories that kind of explain to you how to use the tool or provide use case examples of people using the tool. And then we have our citation information. So these citations are directly, again, from the people who created these tools. Now, for some of them, you can copy and paste right into your paper. However, for this one, you'd need to make sure that you update the access month, day, year, and the year that you've accessed and the version of Appears. But if you download the data in Appears, you'll receive a request complete email from the LP DAAC, and that email will actually have a pre-populated citation for you to use. Below the bubbles, we have the description. So this is just kind of a brief description about the tool and what it does. And then we have the dependency section. So for example, with Appears, you need an Earth data login account. And so this provides you with some more information about how you can sign up for that freely available account. So speaking of Appears, let's jump back into our presentation. So some of the more common questions we've received from users is, how do I subset data by band? How do I just download data as a GeoSDIS? I really just want to download a pixel-based time series. I'd like to download data that's already been mosaicked and cut in my preferred coordinate system. Or I want to be able to explore data and save and monitor selected areas without having to redraw my polygons. And also, where can I decode and learn more about these quality bits? So all these questions and suggestions can be found and completed using Appears. So I wanted to focus in on that tool to show users how to use it. So let's jump back into the website. So here we have Appears. And just to provide a little bit of feedback about Appears and more information, Appears is the application for extracting and exploring analysis-ready samples. Appears is a data subsetter that allows you to access data from a variety of federal archives in an easy and efficient manner. And using Appears, you'll be able to subset the data spatially, temporally, and by layer. Appears provides you not only with the data values, but also the quality information. And you'll be able to explore those data values and quality information via interactive plots and graphs prior to downloading any of the data. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to provide brief demos on both the point extraction and area extraction so you can kind of get a feel of what you can do with Appears. For more in-depth demonstrations, I'm going to refer you to the resources section of the LP DAAC website, which I'll show you in a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started. So for today, I'm going to look at LST and NDVI data over a couple of Arctic flux power sites in Alaska for the summers of the past 5 years. And then we'll look at snow cover, fire, and LAI in Yellowstone National Park for the last 3 years. Now, these are US-based locations, but you can use Appears to do international searches as well. So the very first thing you'll do is log in with your NASA Earth Data login account. Don't worry if you don't have an account. As I mentioned, they're freely available to create. And when you click on the Sign In button, you'll have information on how to create a new account. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Sign In, and it's going to sign me in. So the first thing we're going to do is see how to download a pixel-based time series of data. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Extract and then Point Sample. Now I'm going to go ahead and start a new request this time. So I'll click on Start a New Request, and then I'm going to name my sample. So I will call this Arctic Flux Towers, and then I'll upload the coordinates. So I can either manually enter the coordinates in this box here, or I can drag and drop in a CSV file. So I'll go ahead and drag and drop my CSV file. And now I can see the coordinates have been populated in the box to the right. So I've entered in this ID and category. These two are optional, but they do something really cool in Appears later on. So I'll leave those in and talk to you about that in a second. And then we have our lat and long, which are required. And this box is also editable. So if you need to enter in any more coordinates, or if you need to change something on the coordinates you've listed, you can do that from here. So now let's go ahead and move to look for our coordinates. I'm going to zoom into Alaska, and I can see where my coordinates are located. And again, these are some Arctic flux towers in Alaska. Okay, so now I'm going to enter in my temporal information. And as I mentioned, we just want to focus on what we kind of consider summers. So I'm going to say, is this date recurring? And I'll say yes. And then I'm going to do summers for the Northern Hemisphere. So I'll go ahead and click on, let's say, we'll start with May 1st, and the end date will be August 31st. And my year range is going to be 2015 to 2019. Now, you're probably saying, August 31st, 2019, that would be great to get data ahead of time. Unfortunately, Appears is not that wonderful. It can't predict future data, but this will at least allow you to explore trends going through up until August 22nd or today. And then if you rerun this request again later, you can get the data once August 31st has passed. Okay, so now I'm going to select my layers. So I'll type in NDVI, and this is going to pull up all of the NDVI products that are available in Appears. So I'm going to find the product that I want, which is this Mod 13 Q1 250 meter product. So I'll go ahead and click on this data product, and then I'll click on this data layer. If you haven't really worked with the data before, you can always click on this eye icon to see kind of a glimpse about more information about this specific layer. Now I'm going to add in my daytime temperatures. So I'll type in Mod 11 A2. I could have typed in Terra Modus. I could have typed in temperature. I could have typed in 1,000 meters. That'll bring up all of this information and how you can find the different data products you might be interested in. But I'll go ahead and click on this data product, and then I'll go ahead and add my layer. And now I'm going to submit my request. So now I see my request has been successfully submitted. If it wasn't successfully submitted, this box would be a red color, and I would just need to look through my form to see maybe if I missed entering a name for my sample, something like that. But since it's successfully been submitted, it's going to, 1, email me that it was successfully submitted, and 2, it'll email me when my request has been completed. That email will direct you to this Explore menu, and we can see my request is already starting to run. For the sake of time, I already went ahead and ran a request. So let's click on View the Contents of this request. With the point request, Appears breaks out your results into several different graphs. So here I can explore my different sites, and I can also choose which layers I want to look at. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Add a Line. And now I can see in the graphs below, I can kind of interact with the graph. I can hover over points to see what the data values are. So I can start to kind of make some initial interactions and understand some initial trends. There's also the stacked time series, so I can kind of compare the NDVI values over time, and then I can also see my quality information. There's also the layer comparison, and it looks like this request might have had an error in it, but this would be able to compare an NDVI versus the LST time period. And then below that, we have a scatter plot as well as some quality information. And then we have our categorical overview. So this provides some quality information for that NDVI data via box and whiskers. And then we also have our categories below. So remember how I mentioned that I entered in the ID and category for my different points. So here it has the moist acidic tundra. I had 3 different category locations that were I identified as moist acidic tundra. And so this is going to show through a box and whisker plot what the values are for that overall, as well as I can kind of explore these values for using the different sites as the names that I identified them by. So if I decide that yes, this data is good for me, I can go ahead and click download, the drop-down arrow, and then click download. And this is going to pull up the data that I can download from up here. So I can either download this as a zip file, or I can click on the individual links to download the data. So we have metadata, the granule list, so I know all the granules that went into this order, a README text file with instructions and detail about the request, a JSON file, so if your colleagues out in the field, you can just send them this JSON request file. They can run it through a peers, and then you can explore the data values together. And then also CSV files for the results based on the different data products. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to run an area request. And as I mentioned, one of the common questions or suggestions I receive from users is that they'd like to run a request, be able to save the parameters, and come back to quickly repeat the request again. For example, maybe if they want to see what the most recent change is after a week or so. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Extract an Area Sample, and then I can see my previous requests that I've run. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this Yellowstone National Park. And this is going to pull up a form that looks pretty similar to that point sample form we looked at earlier. There are a couple of key differences that I'll point out, though. So the very first thing we're going to do is name our sample. So I'm going to name this Yellowstone National Park. And I'm going to go ahead and call this 8/22, since that's the date I'm running this request. I already went ahead and uploaded my shape file just by dragging and dropping, same as how I did the CSV file in the last example. And now you can see a shape file of Yellowstone National Park. Now, if you know anything about Yellowstone National Park, you'll know that it doesn't exactly look like this, but that's because the shape selected was too complex to display, and so it was automatically reduced on the screen. However, your request is still going to be processed using all the points in the file. So all the data values I'm getting and the geotip I'll be getting later will actually be mosaics and clips and just provide information from the points of my shape file. So now I have my date information. So I have my start date was January 1st, 2017. My end date was the last time I ran this request. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the calendar, and I'm going to say I want to run this request to today. With the start date, I could either change this to be maybe the day of or the day after I ran the last request, so I can just get the new information, or I can leave it the same so I can explore the trends with the data I'm adding on with this request. I've also added my selected layers already. And here's where the form really changes from the point sample form. So here we have output options. So the file format is either NetPDF4 or GeoTIFF. And so I'm going to select GeoTIFF. And then I can choose my projection. So Appears offers several different types of projections that work well with the data that are currently available in Appears. And we'll be adding more as we add more data to Appears. But I'm going to go ahead and click on Geographic. And then I'm going to submit my request. So I can see that my sample is successfully submitted. So again, I'll receive one email telling me it's been successfully submitted and a second email telling me when the request has been completed. So I'll go ahead and click on the Explore menu. And we can actually see my Arctic Flux Tower has already finished. So that's awesome. My national park request that I just ran is currently running at that 5%. So I went ahead and ran this request earlier this morning. So I'll go ahead and view the contents of this request. Okay, so I can see the different layers that I added to my request, and I can see my shapefile here. And below that, I have my interactive charts and graphs. So I can zoom in and zoom out on the different data values. And these are box and whisker plots. So again, I can hover over them to see what my LAI values are. And you may have noticed as I'm interacting with this graph, my information below is also updating. So this is quality information based on the layers in the data product. So I can hover over this green bar, and this tells me based on the Modland QA bits from this MODIS product that this is good quality data, and it's from the Aqua sensor. And I can look at this gray one is other quality, or if I want to use it, and it's from the Terra sensor. So this is just kind of decoding those quality values for you ahead of time. If you decide that this is data you want to use, again, you'll just click on the drop-down and then click on Download. And here you'll see that these are pretty similar to the point output files that we received. I have my metadata, I have my README text file, that granule list, and the JSON list. But how appears the area sample is different. It also provides you statistics for the quality layers, lookup values for the quality bits, and statistics for the layers as well. And below that, it has the geotiffs of these mosaic geotiffs that I've created using Appears. So I can either download all of these at once, or say I know that I just want a couple of scenes to look at initially. I can control-click to just select a couple of scenes. Then I can click on Download, and I can either download my files right away. If you choose this option, make sure your computer is putting files to where you want them to go. Or you can click on Save the Download List, and you can run and download these later. So if you're using Appears and you ever get kind of stuck, you can always use the Help option. So this has documentation on Appears. This also has documentation on the Appears API. So as I mentioned, we do have an Appears API. And if you want to access it, you can just click on the documentation, which will take you right there. We also have some resources on how to use the Appears API. And then we have the available products in Appears. And we also have the Contact the User Services team if your question is not answered by any of these help documents. Okay, so with that, we're going to go back over to the presentation and talk about resources. Okay, so some of the common resource questions we receive are, where can I find interesting uses of the data? I'd like to see examples of use cases and successes. Are there any videos to tell me about how I can find the data? Do you have any tutorials that work well with HDF files? Do you have any tutorials for open source programs? And as you may have been asking in this presentation, what do all of these acronyms mean? So based on user feedback, we've moved all of our resources into one new section on the website, and we actually created two brand new resources based on user feedback, our outreach materials and our LP DAAC dictionary. So this is just a screenshot of the new section, so let's head over to the website to see a little more. Okay, so I'm going to go to my resources in the top hat, and I'm going to click on View All Resources. So this section is great for you if you're looking for videos, tutorials, how to work with specific elements of the data like that HDF file. And I strongly recommend checking out this section if you're looking for those types of resources. We have our e-learning page, which is a section that provides presentations, tutorials, video tips, and previously recorded webinars. This page is also filterable, so if you just want data tutorials, you can click on tutorials, and that'll bring up all the recent tutorials. And you can even further filter by, for example, clicking on Viewers. So we can click on Viewers, and we can click on this tutorial, and then we can see all the information about the tutorial. So I can jump straight into the tutorial or the Jupyter Notebook. I can see what products relate to this tutorial. I can see what tools relate to this tutorial. And I can also learn kind of more about the tutorial. So I can have kind of a description of the tutorial, what the topics are going to be covered, the data that's going to be used, what I need to know before I'm starting the tutorial. And this is where we'll kind of list if there's any open source software that relates to the tutorial, if you're looking for that. So like this one works with Python, a NASA Earth Day login account. We have the libraries listed, and then it also requires GDAL for some of the sections. And then below that's some more information for the actually running the tutorial. Okay, the next section of resources we have is the outreach materials. So as I mentioned, this is a brand new section. We received frequent requests for imagery that can be used for presentations, on papers, on websites, in classrooms, and that's where all of this content is located. So this is all of our videos, our imagery, and our fact sheets. A lot of our social media content that gets posted on the NASA Earth Data Facebook and Twitter accounts also lives on here in case you want examples of that. And this is also filterable. So I can type in, or I can click on imagery to filter down to just images, and then I can type in fire, and this will pull up just the images we have that relate to fire. And then we have our FAQ section. So this is broken down into various categories of popular questions we receive. When you open up a category, you'll see a list of questions. You can go ahead and click on the question, and that'll take you to a specific part where that question is answered. And then you can link directly to this page. So if, say, your students have some questions about eco-stress data, you can just copy the link and then send it directly to your students, and it'll take them to this section of the page. Under our resources, we also have our data and action section. So these are stories that are written by LP DAAC staff members about how the data are being used or could be used. So here we cover various programs that use data, like the NASA Develop Internship Program. We have a highlights from the literature section where we cover 3 unique stories or papers that have been published in the last quarter that use the data. We also cover current events that can be observed through using LP DAAC data and more. So if you're looking for just quick overviews of use case examples, this is a great section to go to. And I can click on this highlights from the literature, and this is one of our recent stories, so it'll kind of give you an example of what you might see with the data and action story. So it kind of summarizes what the authors wrote about and uses some imagery to show you some examples of the data. And speaking of the highlights from the literature section, so we only cover 3 stories in our data and action series. However, we do read through hundreds of papers that have used data in the last quarter, and then we publish the papers here on this publications page. So this publications page is a great place to find where other scientists or other researchers like yourself are creating and updating and writing new papers that have been published. Again, this is updated quarterly, and it's on a rolling 2-year basis. And then finally, we have the LP DAAC dictionary. So the LP DAAC dictionary, as I mentioned, is brand new. It was released earlier this summer, and the dictionary lists and defines many different terms and acronyms that we've used for the LP DAAC. So for example, if you don't understand what AQUA is, you can read the quick little example that AQUA is the Earth observing satellite. That says Aster, ATBDs, albedos. If there's a specific term you're looking at, you can click on the letter, and that'll bring up the terms we have that relate to that letter. And if all else fails, if you still have questions, you can go to the contact section, and then you can click on contact information. So this form will send an email to one of our in-house user services team at EROS. If you prefer, you can also call them over the phone, or you can email them directly. Okay, so I'm going to go back into our presentation real quick. Now, with all that said, as you can see, the survey is super important to us. It provides us a lot of great feedback that we can work with. And next year's survey is coming up in the next couple of months. So if you do receive an invitation to take it, please do so. And also let us know if you'd like to be invited to take the survey. We also post reminders about the survey on the LP DAAC listserv. So feel free to sign up for the listserv. As I mentioned, that provides about 1 to 2 emails a month that have information about news, current events coming out of the LP DAAC, new data products, those types of things. And you don't have to wait until the survey to give us your feedback. You can always submit your questions or comments to us throughout the year by emailing us at the lpdaac@usgs.gov. Okay, so I've said a lot, and I want to thank you all for your time. And at this point, I'm going to turn this presentation back over to Jennifer.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Danielle. At this point, what we'll do is we'll transition to a final set of optional polling questions, and we'll give these about 3 to 4 minutes or so. We have quite a few today. And we really appreciate your feedback on these questions. And then from there, we'll transition directly to the question and answer period. Oh, I did want to make a note for the LP DAAC listserv subscription. That information is not visible to all participants, only visible to the presenter and to me. So we are not broadcasting those email addresses if you're interested in signing up. All right, everybody, let's give these about 3 minutes to 4 minutes or so. Thank you. Okay, everybody, we've got about 30 seconds left for the for the end polling questions. But if you think of something that you'd like to add, you can always do so during the Q&A and submit any additional commentary there, and we'll forward it along to our speaker in the LP DAAC. Thank you. All right, everybody, at this point, we're going to transition to the Q&A period. And I don't currently, just a couple of notes while we're waiting for questions. One of the questions was whether or not this webinar will be on the e-learning site. And yes, LP DAAC will post links to this webinar on their e-learning site as well. If anyone is interested in receiving a copy of Danielle's presentation today, you will need to contact her directly, and I will place her email address into the Q&A pod now, so everybody has that. Okay, and our first question is there any soil moisture data? So
we do.
I'll let you answer, but there's also soil moisture data at other distributed active archive centers. But go ahead, Danielle.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. So in Appears, you can download SNAP data, which is soil moisture data, and there are other DAACs that offer soil moisture data, so I can make sure that I can get you the name of a contact if you have more information or questions about that.
So I'll type into here, Sharice, soil moisture data is available through the National Snow and Ice Data Center DAAC, and there's some other model output type soil moisture data products that are Goddard DAAC. So I can actually follow up with you offline if you'd like. And the next question is, Danielle, how can I have my paper published on LP DAAC?
Yep, so if you have a paper that's been published in a journal, you can just email me a link or email that lpdaac@usgs.gov, a link to your paper, and then we'll kind of read through it and decide if we want to add it to the publications table or not. We've had some users in the past who have submitted MODIS data products, but they were data products or like snow products, which we don't distribute, but then I could forward that paper on to NSIDC so they could advertise it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Danielle. Our next question is, are you planning to add your data sets in the Google Earth Engine, which is another user-friendly portal? Now some of them are included in the Earth Engine, but most of them are not included.
Yeah, so Google Earth is pulling in our data. We don't have any access to like verify everything with the data that's in Google Earth Engine. So that is data that is available, and I believe they are pulling in all of our data, but we can't guarantee anything once the data has left the LP DAAC if you're downloading it. I don't think there'd be any reason to worry, but we just have to say that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danielle. And give me just a second. Quite a few questions are coming in here. Okay, the next question is, do you have any tutorials on OpenDAP access?
Hi, this is Aaron from the LP DAAC. I could probably answer that question. Currently, we don't have any tutorials on OpenDAP access directly. If that's something that you really want to do and are dedicated to that, then I would recommend reaching out to us through our user service pipeline. But most of the people who want access to OpenDAP or want to extract data through OpenDAP, their needs can usually be satisfied through Appears or the Appears API. So I would recommend trying that pathway first before trying to access our OpenDAP directly.
Thank you, Aaron. All right, our next question is, there's also a few webinars that are focused on OpenDAP access. If you go to our NASA Earth Data YouTube channel, you will find a few. So that's another resource that's available to you. The next question is, what would be the most recent GWELS data that's available?
Yeah, sure. So GWELS is going to be available. Let me pull my slide back up. GWELS is going to be available from 1985 to 2010. So 2010 would be the most recent data. And it's a every 5-year product.
Yes, Danielle, this is Carolyn, and just to follow up with that, the epoch that we are starting with is epoch year 2000, followed by 1990, and then progressing to the most future data that we will have, which is 2010.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. The next question that we have here is there any stable API where I can download all of the MODIS VIRS fire data, for example, MOD 14 and MYD 14 and VNP 14 with their geolocation products, MOD 03, MYD 13, VNP 13, MODLL?
Not at the LP DAAC currently, no.
So for near real-time fire data, yeah, so those are the research qualities that you're referencing here. We can follow up with you offline on that topic. All right, let's see if there are any additional questions here.
And I had noticed on one of the website feedback, someone had mentioned they wanted the MODIS products table back. And actually, if you go to that Get Started with Data section, the collection overview missions, it will filter, there's the MODIS products table, and you can click on that, and that'll bring up list view of just all of the MODIS products. You could also go into Search Data Catalog and go into the collections and select the 3 MODIS products, so the Aqua MODIS collection, the Combined MODIS collection, and the Terra MODIS collection, and that'll pull up that MODIS table.
Thanks very much for the clarification, Danielle. The next question that we've received here is, what's the finest resolution available with the new EFI drought indicator?
So for the drought indicator that I was talking about earlier, that's the 70-meter EcoStress product.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. Are there any additional questions? Okay, well, we'll give it a minute or two, but if there are no additional questions, we just received another. If I have an FTP type access to the data in the event of a down server time, I guess you're asking, will a message be sent to the users? I'm not sure if so what you're asking, I guess, is will a message be sent to the users if the servers are down and you're, trying to download data? Is that right, Therese? Okay. So, Danielle.
So it kind of depends. So as I mentioned, we are down on Wednesdays, typically from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And that's just kind of for routine maintenance. So sometimes the data pool will be up during that time. Sometimes it'll be down. It just kind of depends. If we do have a more extended error, or if, for example, you've downloaded a lot of MODIS surface reflectance and we notice there's something wrong with the product, we have in the past contacted users that have recently downloaded the data. If you're pulling from an FTP and you're just wanting an email every time the server goes down, unfortunately, we don't really offer that service. But you can always check the website to see if there's any notification about errors, or we'll sometimes send out messages either through that listserv or, again, contacting the users if there's a larger error or issue.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions? Okay, are there any 3D data applications?
Most of the data
yes, go ahead.
at the LP DAAC is basically two-dimensional. We do have the temporal component to it, but that's usually separate from in a separate file, or each composite period is a separate file. Depending on how creative you get, you can add the DEMs that we have to whatever data set you're working with. So, but as far as being kind of natively multi-dimensional, to have three-dimensional awareness in a program, we do not contain data sets like that.
Thanks for your response, Aaron. Are there any additional questions from anybody? And again, if you're interested in receiving a copy of, seems like there might be another, you're very welcome. If you're interested in receiving a copy of today's presentation as far as the slide deck, I did include the email address for our speaker today in the Q&A pod. You can always email me as well if you missed that for that information. Otherwise, what we'll do, if there are no further questions, we will log off from the audio component and leave the virtual meeting space open. So if you think of something that you'd like some feedback on from the LP DAAC, please feel free to jot that into the Q&A pod, and we will follow up with you offline. All right, looking for questions one more time here. Anybody? Okay, with that, I would like to thank today's speaker and also all of the question and answer panelists from LP DAAC who logged in and provided input as well. We appreciate your participation. And thanks goes to all of you for your participation today. All right, our next webinar will be held on September 4th, and we'll focus on how to create a NetCDF file. And if you stay tuned to our I'll type it into the Q&A pod, but our online Adobe Connect webinars catalog will have an announcement in the next day or so. All right, I don't see any further questions. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Danelle.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Delphi.
you.
All right, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.